Hey there. Welcome to Radio NIGP. This month's focus is on supplier relationships. Many may view these relationships as opposing sides. However, as we've moved to a more global economy, these relationships have become more collaborative. Even in a collaborative relationship, boundaries need to be set to maintain procurement integrity. Open and fair procurement processes are critical to a transparent public procurement organization. So let's listen to our procurement friends on their take about supplier relationships. Enjoy, and as always, we hope you have a great day.
Hi, this is Don Buffum with Radio NIGP. I'm here with my good friends Dave Nash and Kevin Yin. And today we're talking about supplier relationships. And having been around this business for a long time, I know that back when I started in the 80s and 90s, vendor relationships were looked at differently. But there's still a lot of people that have the same old school attitude, in my opinion. And that's basically, you're buying from the low bidder. They're supposed to get you the right product, the right time. Why do you care if you have a supplier relationship? What difference does it make? In fact, if you have a buyer relationship with the supplier, doesn't that mean that maybe there's some kind of kickback or something going on? I mean, that's old school. Yeah. What do you thought, Kevin?
Well, yeah, I believe they're in arm's length relationship, but I think, or having an arm's length between you and the supplier. But I think there is a need to build good relationship with your suppliers, and even, if nothing else, just to be a nice person, right? Be a good human being. And so, but I do see why that belief is still in place, and the belief that we shouldn't get too close with a supplier. It's the optic that or perception from others looking in on you in terms of hey, that you're a buyer, and I saw you having lunch with whomever, right? XYZ supplier. So there is, I think there's, you have to know where the boundaries are in terms of where does being nice and being cordial stop, and where does it where's the bad optics begin, right? And so I think it takes some finessing to ensure that, one, you want to build a good relationship, but two, you're not crossing the line to the other side where you could create the bad optics or the negative perception. Yeah. Dave, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. We often have. I never minded vendors coming in and cold calling. Sit down and talk to me, and I explain how we do bids in the city and everything else, and purchases in the city. And a lot of time, these people are just trying to make a connection. Yes, they have a job to do. Yes, they need sales. They may be on commission, but they're just trying to make a connection. I had one vendor years ago when I was running the warehouse for the city. We're going back 20 years ago, and she came in one day. She used to come in about once a quarter, and she found out that I like to ski. So every time she'd come in, the first question out of her, "Hey, you've been skiing?" I mean, it could be the middle of July in South Florida. It's like, where would I have gone skiing in Peru? But people are always trying to make a connection, even vendors. And I had for the 9 years that I ran the warehouse for the city, I had a vendor down in Miami. Never met the guy, but he was Johnny on the spot. Always responded to quotes. He within an hour he'd fax back a quote. Always responded, pretty much always, 9 times out of 10 would respond to a sealed bid. And he was great. And if I got in a bind or something, we have little side, call them up. We had little side stories, and we go, well, I got one of these situations again. Ron was his name. And we always said, one of these days when we retire, we ought to have lunch together. We never thought of doing it while their business relationship was going on. But, having people like that in your not backlog, but your stable of good vendors is incredible. What do you think about that, Don?
Well, I think that it's no brainer that our suppliers are one of our greatest resources. They have information, whether it's a cold call, whether it's a regular visit. That's one of the things I hated most about COVID is it stopped all the suppliers coming into my office, sitting down and just shooting the bull about what's going on in the industry, what's happening in the world, because I think that's a way that we gain lots of knowledge. We had a vendor, you talk about having a good relationship with a vendor. We had one vendor right after Katrina hit. He came in and embedded himself in our emergency operations center. And when we needed something that we couldn't source, he would contact his home office. The home office would look for it. And 9 times out of 10, we'd end up buying it from somebody other than the company he worked for. But he was devoting his time to helping us after Katrina. So good relationships, obviously, you have to have lines, but that's one of the best things is if you have a good relationship with a vendor and you communicate with them really well, then both of you understand what those lines are, what the expectations are. And if those expectations change, you have an easy way to communicate that.
Right.
Whereas a vendor that you only see once every 2 years and they come in and say, why am I not getting any business? You kind of go, well, you got to be here. You got to show your face. We've got to be able to count on you. And so I think that kind of relationship is beneficial, obviously, to both parties, which any relationship that's one-sided isn't going to be a relationship.
Yeah, and I think the mentality that we're a public entity and the suppliers are required to provide us whatever it is that we asked of them because they're the lowest bid or whatever, they have a contract. That way of thinking, I mean, it's good, but it's also bad in the perspective that that somehow the other side is just a robot that just fulfilling whatever is in the contract. But your example is a fine example in that in a crunch, and who knows, right? You need to have suppliers that you can rely upon, but more so, the suppliers needs to actually have that trust and that relationship, that connection with us, right? In order for them to go out of their ways to help, just as in your situation. And it doesn't even have to be a disaster of that nature. It could just be a supply shortage.
Yep.
Right. And in that particular instant, I mean, who would you most likely help more? The person that you have built a great relationship with, or the one that you never see, right? And so, or talk to for that matter. So I think building good relationship is just building with those relationship credits so that one day you can help or cash out some of that, right? And so, but the opposite side is understanding where that boundary, where the boundaries are, so that you don't cross over and create a negative perception and then totally ruin the relationship in terms of from a supplier and buyer perspectives.
Totally agree.
Yeah. So you want to close us out, Don?
I just was wondering, do either of you guys have anything additional psyops?
I think we pretty much hit it. The boundaries, the optics, the arm's length, but have some people that you know that you can count on, and
I guess the biggest thing
things are going to happen. Yeah.
Yeah, the biggest thing I tell my suppliers is I understand we buy stuff from you and services from you, but really what I'm looking from you is solutions. And that's where a relationship builds solutions. And rather than us buying the old fluorescent lamp and continuing to do it, we're now getting LEDs or what's the greatest that's happening in the industry. We're taking advantage of it because of our suppliers and that communications. So,
yeah, and I'm sorry, I'm just going to add one more thing to that.
Okay.
But in addition to, it's really that value engineering too, right? The value add that they can bring to the table, and having that good relationship will, because they trust you and they know you and they understand what it is that you're trying to do. I think that's going to be helpful when you have that good relationship with them because they want to help.
Yeah,
And it's our human inclination to want to help people we like, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So why be a jerk about all this? just be kind and nice. Yeah. We're all good human beings.
Yeah.
So
I think that pretty well sums it up. So let's. I hope this is helpful to you folks out there, Radio NIGP land, and so we'll see you next month on Hot Topics. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Welcome to Chapter Updates, and thank you for joining us for another look at the chapterific things our members do. This month, we're talking supplier events. Trade show, reverse trade show, vendor expo, golf outing, no matter what you call it, many of our chapters and chapters of other professional organizations host annual trade show events, some even holding more than one per year. The truly creative chapters even found ways to do this during the pandemic, keeping those ever-important relationships alive. My research, which I did on my own to save pennies for the next time, tells me that just among the NIGP chapters, there are at least 15 trade shows coming up between now and the end of the calendar year, including the granddaddy of them all, the Expo at NIGP Forum. So why are these important? We know one reason they are important to those of us who are NIGP chapter members is that they help fund chapter activities, which in turn provide educational opportunities for those members whose agencies may not have the funding to support the professional development we desire. But they also give the procurement professional the networking opportunities needed to meet new suppliers, and the events allow us to learn about new products and services to better serve our customers. Most importantly, these events allow us to connect, to build those important relationships with suppliers, which becomes so valuable when a problem arises. Remember back in 2020 when the pandemic hit and we all needed masks right now? Who did we call? Of course, we tried the suppliers of PPE first, but when those avenues dried up, we leaned on our supplier relationships and contacted the suppliers we know. Some of them even reached out to us, assisting us to source the goods we needed. On the other side of the coin, why do suppliers come to trade shows? The more suppliers understand about how we do business, the better they can prepare to compete for our business. An event like this is also very advantageous to our suppliers. I've always said it's a great opportunity to visit with all of us at one time in one place. We're helping the suppliers save time on sales calls. Doing a bit more research, I talked to one of my local suppliers and found that they agree. At trade shows, they have the opportunity to demonstrate their products and find how they can better support us. One of the key things they like about the chapter events is that it allows for networking opportunities that they may not get during our day-to-day operations. They recognize our time in the office can be limited for individual meetings as we manage our daily operations. So, am I saying we should throw caution to the wind when building our supplier relationships? Of course not. As procurement professionals, we have to be aware of potential conflicts of interest and must not fall into that old, you rub my back, I'll rub yours school of thought. Or we'll end up on a segment of Stacey Gregg's I don't look good in orange. Now that we've shared the benefits for you, your chapter, and the suppliers, get involved. Volunteer to help your chapter start or run their next event, but at a minimum, be sure to participate. Our supplier relationships are a valuable component to our profession. Thank you and see you next time.
Hello, welcome to Radio NIGP. Our segment for today is Supplier Relationships. My name is Bobby Tolston, and I'd like to welcome you to the first Deeper Dive Make a Splash segment. I have two great guests joining us today that have very good insight into our topic. We have Barbara Johnson, who is one of the subject matter experts that wrote the on-demand course, and we have Kim Abrego, who has taken the course. So let's get started. Barb Johnson, tell us a little bit about yourself and about your hand in making this wonderful course so successful.
Good morning, Bobby. Thank you so much for inviting me to join you. I, as you know, do create content for NIGP, but I will say the lead on this project was Linda Allaire, who at this time of this recording is on a cruise and cannot join us except for a huge expense. So she is kind enough to bless my involvement, but the two of us actually worked in concert with the Business Council and Todd Slater, the content director. So the chief content officer of NIGP.
Okay, well, thank you so much. And our second guest, who has been so gracious to join us today, Kim, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what do you do over there at your company?
Yeah, thanks, Bobby. Thanks for having me on. So I am Kim Abrego. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Disaster Recovery Services. And we're a company that helps state and local governments recover from disasters like hurricanes, fires, floods, and those types of things.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. So today, the reason I have these two guests here is because I believe that they have some value to add to this topic. So as you heard, Barb Johnson is one of the SMEs that developed this content. So Barb, please share with our audience the purpose for the course certificate and master designations for suppliers for this course.
Well, I'm honored and pleased to share that with you because for years, I won't tell you how many, but for years, NIGP membership and Business Council leaders have indicated that they would like to see training or at least more enlightenment for the Business Council. And I believe that because nowadays we're a little bit more willing to be partners, or shall I say strategic, with our suppliers versus not just arm's length, but almost having no conversations with them. I believe we've realized, thanks to the Business Council and others, that suppliers make a huge difference in our effectiveness and therefore the effectiveness of our entity, be it a special authority, a county, a city, or what. That's pretty much a big part of the equation to succeed. Given those factors, it was time. And I believe that because the Supplier Council was so deeply involved in creating this learning, it will be successful.
Thank you so much for that insight. So Kim, I believe you've taken the course. Can you share with our audience some of the benefits that you found in taking this course?
Yeah, I sure can. So I did the Supplier Master's designation, which is the 12-hour course. There's the Essentials, which is the 7. And aside from just the immediate benefits in gaining that knowledge as a supplier and what the procurement practitioners are doing and their viewpoint. I mean, you immediately get to take that and integrate it into how you engage with the practitioner community. So and that engagement, whether it's responding to requests for proposals, whether it's having meetings, right? You now understand the environment and the framework that they are having to operate in, and you can then adjust and be respectful of that. So there's kind of an immediate benefit there. And then I'd say there's a longer term benefit too, in that as the word gets out about this supplier designation, I'm seeing, even in just the infancy stages here, of an acknowledgement from the practitioner community that suppliers are putting in the time and the resources to understand the environment, which gets to Barb's point of it being more of a strategic partnership, less moving away from that transactional into how, as a supplier, can I help you while maintaining ethics, transparency, and all of the things that you have to do, right? How can I do that and understand that and still get to an outcome that both of us want to get to?
Perfectly. Perfect. Well said. And I can tell you, as a practitioner, working with suppliers like yourself that have taken this class, I can tell you it helps us to have a conversation that we both understand where we're coming from. We understand the WIFM, or the what's in it for us, right? And I think that it just makes everyone more comfortable with each other, because when you have an idea of what's going on, there is no behind the curtains and what are they doing back there, right? It really adds to the transparency and the transactional, as you stated. I can see as a practitioner that strategic sourcing is where the future lies, and we're all heading there together. So Barb, I'd like to turn to you. What do you want our suppliers to take away from these courses?
Well, I'm delighted to hear Kim's comments and yours. I think they're right on. The essentials essentially gives you the opportunity to have a meaningful conversation, or at least interpret the documents that those procurement practitioners develop, believing that they're being very clear, but if there's not understanding of even the language, it's not as clear. So taking the essentials, at least I think, gives them a leg up in terms of absorbing the information we want them to know about what the entity's needs are. And the master's course is more strategic. Let me say that just like suppliers maybe have some discussions about certain practitioners, and I'm going to say how good they are, how much they understand, the same happens in the procurement offices. There are discussions about, gosh, this person knew exactly what I was saying. They interpreted it correctly. And in fact, sometimes you quote unquote move up the line. So if you're enlightened and you're practicing and you understand as a supplier, you may actually be talking to people higher level in the organization than just at the basic transactional level. You know, what's your supplier information so we can put it in our database? I mean, that's important, but those tools just support the success that is delivered by the public sector.
Yes.
So I want them to take away the various levels that they can succeed in, and I know people freak out at the word partnership sometimes, but it is a respectful partnership among practitioner and valued supplier.
Very well said. Thank you so much for that. Wow. Whew, that just kind of took my breath away. That was just awesome. Thank you. Kim, any final thoughts from you?
Yeah, I would say to the practitioners out there that are just learning about this designation for suppliers, right? I think it's important from the Business Council, we're doing our best to educate all of the suppliers out there that this exists. But if we can come at that from both sides of the equation, where on the practitioner side, if you have suppliers that you feel would benefit from taking this course, whether it be the shorter or the longer version, to feel free to recommend that. I think suppliers we've seen in the market are hungry for this information. So the more we can get the word out there, I think we just elevate the entire relationship and profession. So.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to add that this is the first show for Deeper Dive Making a Splash. But for Radio NIGP, this is the first show that we've actually interviewed a supplier. So you're our first supplier that we've interviewed for the show. Thank you so much for joining us. And Barb, I'd like for you to take us to the end. What would you like to share with our audience?
Well, first of all, it's been delightful to have the conversation and learn that although we have never spoken directly with each other, Kim and I obviously are on the same page, and that's the key. That is the key. And so that means after having taken the course, she has greater insight. The key also is while the Business Council is spreading the word among suppliers, Radio NIGP is spreading the word among practitioners, not just to suggest to suppliers that they take the course, but elevating their work with the suppliers and realizing how much it'll make a difference in what their entity can provide. And Kim, I just wanted to add that as you are in the disaster services business, more than ever, we appreciate that you have this service available. And that's what I mean. She sees it every day. I see four walls of an office every day. So there is insight to be had out there. And last, I do recall a wonderful quote that said, 1 hour with a wise person may take the place of hundreds of hours of work and study, but we want you to take a class. So, and then you'll be able to speak to each other more meaningfully.
Thank you both so much. And to our loyal listening audience, please take the opportunity to visit our website for the on-demand course for Supplier Essentials. And if you find it beneficial, please make sure that you share it with valued suppliers and other practitioners. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you back here again real soon. Take care.
This month, Radio NIGP is focusing on relationships with suppliers.
Procurement professionals' relationships with suppliers have been seen as kind of an arm's length, and in some cases, even as adversarial.
It is important that in the procurement climate of today, with global supply chain shortages, potential pricing increases, and a worldwide staffing crisis due to the big quit, that procurement professionals engage in a discourse with the vendor community that is advantageous to both parties. So Tech Talk thought it might be valuable to cover some tips and a little case law about the consulting contracts that are frequently used to help build a complex IT solution.
So if you have a complex IT procurement, there's probably a good chance that your entity does not have the internal subject matter experts to build the specifications and requirements needed for a successful solicitation. More than likely, you'll need to seek out an IT consultant to help you develop and prepare requirements for the solicitation. Unfortunately, many of us forget to add the necessary additional specific limitations to the consultant's contract. The first limitation is that the consultant needs to be aware that they will not be able to submit a response to the solicitation that they helped develop. This prohibition includes submitting as a prime consultant or subconsultant, or as a sub-consultant or a subcontractor on a submission to the solicitation. In other words, if the consultant participated in generating the specifications in any way, they're also prohibited from submitting a proposal to the solicitation in any way. The second limitation is that the consultant hired to write the requirements needs to be aware that they are not to communicate anything about the solicitation to other potential suppliers at any time during the development or procurement process. The best way to address this potential conflict of interest is to have the consultant functioning as your subject matter expert sign a non-disclosure or confidentiality agreement.
So did you know that there is case law directly related to this? Our friend Kirk from Legally Speaking gave us the inside scoop on a related case. The case is Sutron Corp versus Lake County Water Authority. In this case, Sutron Corp was a subconsultant on studies done for and prior to an IT project being solicited, and someone from the Water Authority told them that being a subconsultant would not preclude them from submitting a bid for this IT project. When the responses were received, the Water Authority rejected all the responses and resolicited. When the Water Authority resolicited, they made sure to include language stating that consultants and subconsultants on the studies done prior to and related to the IT project would not be able to submit. The courts upheld this decision to reject all and resolicit. The change in language made sure that no supplier who submitted for the bid had an unfair advantage. This case law serves as a cautionary tale. It is very important to have protocol and guidelines in place for dealing with vendors. Remember, the goal is to establish a good relationship with vendors. This relationship is not only successful when both parties, procurement and the vendor community, understand all of the rules of engagement. Some jurisdictions post these policies and practices on their website and in their vendor portal. And also, they can be published forms for distribution at vendor fairs and events. So that's all for Tech Talk this month. Join us next month on Radio NIGP.
Bye.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Legally Speaking. My name is Mike Beavis, and I'm here with Kirk Buffington and Valerie Scott, and we're going to talk to you a little bit today about vendor relationships, conflicts of interest, ethics, and legal aspects of those kinds of things. But first thing I'd like to do as I start out is explain my perception of this, and then Kirk will take a piece of it, and then Valerie will give us some examples, and I'll wrap it up for you. But here goes. Compliance with the law is not ethics. Ethics is much harder. If there's a legal thing that says code of ethics, that's a set of rules you follow to avoid being fired or losing your pension or going to jail, right? Real ethics are something more and something more important. The way I like to look at it is the way judges look at it. So judges have a code of ethics that says they have to avoid even the appearance of an impropriety. So they don't show up with opposing counsel somewhere where they shouldn't. And it's really hard for judges because they're all related to the lawyers, because they're all family and it all happens that way. But the judges have to avoid even the appearance of an impropriety. So you'll find that if you look at the legal requirements around conflicts and around ethics, they'll say you can't accept a gift if it's valued more than a certain amount, or that you can't have a conflict of interest unless you disclose it, right? Or all these other unlesses or until. Well, when we're doing things, it's a little bit different and a little bit tougher. And that especially happens when we compare what we do to what folks in the private sector do. And Kirk, I know you'd like to say a little bit about that topic.
Hi, thanks, Mike. So we know that many of you have moved into public procurement after having worked in the private sector. As I'm sure you've already realized, there are many differences between the public and private sector procurement. Chief among these is how we interact and collaborate with our suppliers. While it is totally acceptable and even in the best interest of your agency to collaborate with your suppliers, you must conduct yourself in a manner that is above reproach. Collaborating with your suppliers has many benefits, including reduced costs, consolidation of the supply chain, increasing responsiveness, and enhanced stability and business continuity. But when dealing with your suppliers, it is important to remember perception is reality. If you are seen having a cup of coffee at Starbucks with one of your suppliers, it will be presumed that the supplier is buying, and the perception may very well be that you are sharing information with that supplier that you are not sharing with others. So remember, perception is reality. And Valerie is going to take off with a gift issue. Hi, Valerie.
Hey, Kirk, thanks for the introduction. And speaking of coffee, early in my purchasing agent career, I attended a supplier sponsored event. It was with our strategic office supplies vendor for the agency. And at the event, they collected business cards for a drawing. And at the end of the event, I was the lucky winner. My business card was drawn out of the hat as the winner of a brand new Keurig. And I thought that was pretty cool. So I was surprised a little bit, being kind of young and new into public procurement, when I got back to the office to share the good news with my director. And he had a lot of questions about this for me and this wonderful new coffee machine that was being delivered. And rightly so. And so he wanted to know, did they just give it to me? How did I get selected as the winner? Did everyone have a fair opportunity to win the Keurig? And I was able to confirm that it was a random drawing. Everyone who attended the event had the opportunity, and it was a random selection. And I confirmed that the Keurig would be delivered to the agency and not to my home. And ultimately, he decided that it would be okay to keep the Keurig in our break room at the office. And eventually, when I left that agency to pursue a new opportunity, the Keurig stayed at the office.
That's a great story, Valerie. Thank you. And that idea of gifts permeates what we do and permeates what happens when we attend conferences. It's like, even if you get a free coffee cup and even if you bring it to work, do you use it at work if it has another vendor's name on it? Because how does a vendor feel when they look at you on the video and you hold up a coffee cup with their competitor's name, right? Or when you walk into the office. Right. So my advice on the gifts at conferences and stuff is, don't bring the extra suitcase for the junk you collect. Just leave it there. Half the time I used to collect it all and leave it in the hotel room because I didn't have enough room anyway. So think about it and think about avoiding even that appearance of an impropriety. You may be able to squeak by on the legal requirement and not go to jail, but you won't establish the reputation that you really want as a professional procurement officer. So, Valerie, Kirk, any last words?
Not for me, Mike.
Not for me.
Great. Well, thank you. And we look forward to seeing you again on Legally Speaking. Bye.
Hello. Welcome to Way to Grow. It's time now for another NIGP mentorship moment. And today I'm very fortunate to be joined by our newest member of the NIGP Business Council, Becca Blazak, who represents CoProcure on the council and responsible for partnerships and community engagement at CoProcure, which allows its users to perform their due diligence by making available free cooperative contract searches from many different cooperative organizations that serve the public sector, from 300 plus national, state, and local sources, and over 50,000 active cooperative contracts. Wow. Becca, welcome to Way to Grow.
Thank you so much for having me, Keith. As you mentioned, CoProcure helps you find cooperative contracts from national purchasing cooperatives, plus your go-to sources like states and your local agency neighbors, all in one place, all for free. You can think of us like an Expedia for cooperative and piggybackable language contracts. I have to say, as someone who has spent time now working in both the technology sector and the public sector, it has been so much fun to be part of a passionate, mission-driven team that's building free technology for the procurement community. And our mission at CoProcure is really to empower public servants to deliver better, faster public services from a more diverse group of vendors. And that mission is really at the core of everything that we do.
Okay, well, that's great news and great for your users. So right now, I have a couple of questions. that also might interest our viewers today as well. And first of all, I wanted to ask, what prompted CoProcure to join the NIGP Business Council?
Yep. Very good question. Very fair question. The Business Council really touches, I think, on two themes that are really core to our approach at CoProcure. So the first is helping procurement professionals learn from each other. And the second is making better connections between the public procurement professionals and suppliers. Keith, as a veteran NIGP member, I know that you know that the spirit of collaboration in procurement is already really strong. People are so generous with your time, and you have been very generous with your time for us at CoProcure as well. So, we think by aggregating all of the contracts that procurement professionals have created already and putting them all in one place, that we can build the technical infrastructure that empowers that spirit of collaboration in procurement. We want folks to be able to do more by collaborating together more seamlessly. And so, of course, a core theme of NIGP and the Business Council is to support the profession by helping procurement professionals connect to and learn from each other. So CoProcure is taking a technical approach to really driving this shared vision forward. So the council is a natural place for us to plug in. And on that second point of alignment, again, very natural in supporting procurement professionals and suppliers, to build better connections. The council was formed to help suppliers and procurement professionals share best practices and experiences. And that intersection between procurement and the supplier communities is, again, like I said, a natural place for CoProcure to plug in, because our product really supports both sides of the ecosystem. At CoProcure, we often encourage our users to not reinvent the wheel by leveraging the work of others, and joining the Business Council captures that same spirit for us. We think that we can work towards our shared goals of supporting the procurement profession and facilitating more impactful solutions between procurement professionals and suppliers by joining forces with NIGP through our participation on the council.
That's great. And I agree with you. It's always great to have a collaborative spirit no matter what you do. So now our program segment, Way to Grow, is all about mentorship. So I'd like to ask you if you feel that your participation on the Business Council is going to provide a learning opportunity for you and your coworkers. And what are you hoping to learn through your experience as a member of the NIGP Business Council?
Yeah, absolutely. This is an opportunity for us to learn from many who have been in the space for a long time. Like I've said, we are really focused on building the best tool for procurement teams. And in order to deliver on that goal, we have to really deeply understand the experience of both procurement practitioners and suppliers. So I know I'm really looking forward to continuing to build relationships with and learn from procurement professionals and suppliers through our engagement on the council. And I'm excited to take those learnings back to my team, which is ultimately going to help us build a better product in support of the public procurement community. In that same spirit of openness and collaboration, our team is really committed to sharing the learnings that we've gathered with the broader procurement community. I know I get to personally talk to procurement teams across the country almost every day, definitely multiple times a week. And that means I have the great fortune of getting to connect with leaders in the space and practitioners who are doing a lot of amazing work already. And what we're doing to make sure that more people can access the learnings that we get to hear all the time is we've created free educational sessions on cooperative procurement that NIGP members can now access through NIGP's chapter ambassador visits. So sessions are curated to support procurement professionals who are interested in enhancing collaboration and building leadership skills. And all of the sessions feature public procurement professionals who are taking innovative approaches to collaboration already. So it's not CoProcure talking about it. We want to feature your peers who are doing all this great work. In fact, Keith, you have participated in one of the sessions that we offer. It's Advancing Equity in Cooperative Procurement. And I know many folks have found your insights and learnings incredibly helpful. So I wanted to say thank you for all that you do as a mentor to the procurement community today.
Well, Becca, I want to thank you for taking the time to chat with me today on A Way to Grow. And For those of our viewers, I want to remind them that they can find the NIGP mentorship program as well as our mentorship Facebook page at www.nigp.org/events/mentorship. And now this is Keith Glass speaking and hoping that you'll join me soon here on Radio NIGP for another segment of Way to Grow, and reminding you that this is Radio NIGP.
Hello, and welcome to Visionary Views. I'm Linda Allaire, a staff member of Radio NIGP, and today we have the privilege of speaking with Carl Benito. Carl, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Linda, and appreciate being on Radio NIGP today. My name is Carl Benito. I am the Manager of Purchasing and Risk Management Services at Northumberland County. It's a county just about an hour and a half outside of east of Toronto in Canada. I've been in procurement almost 20 years, started in the private sector, worked all the way through many Fortune 500 companies, then landed at the government, and been here for 14 years now.
Wow, 14 years already.
14 years already.
I remember when you were new in that position.
That's right. I remember that like it was yesterday.
So, Carl, you volunteer for NIGP in a number of different areas. Can you give us a little bit of information on how you got started with volunteering or even with the local chapter?
Yeah, actually. So when I started in the public sector, when I came over from the private to the public sector, I was looking for, education on, learning more about it because there was such a significant change between the two. Someone told me about the local chapter, someone that I was going to some meetings with another organization I was part of, and said, you need to check this out. They worked for the province of Ontario and kind of put me in that direction. So the first thing I did was contact the OPBA, so the Ontario Public Buyers Association, just to get more information about, what they did for their members, they had conferences and those types of things. And they set me up with a mentor right away, just to kind of, go over some stuff with me, someone I could just bounce ideas off of, same kind of thing that the NIGP does with their mentorship program. So from there, I really dived deep into, public procurement, and went to the first conference, which was in an area called Blue Mountains here in Ontario. And there I was at a conference, and one of the board members, I was speaking with them, and they said, we think you'd be a good volunteer for, doing the IT. It's where I started actually within it as managing some of the library where we put documents. So after talking to him for a bit, I said, yeah, sure. Why not? Like I enjoy, the profession. So let me see what this is all about and how much work it entails, and I'll get involved. And that's really where it all started for me. And then I was I was a mentee on the board at that time in the technology area, and assisted with putting up documents. And at that time we had chapter managers, so I'd go to the chapter manager conferences and our own conferences, and then it grew from there, just helping out with conference planning and other areas wherever they needed assistance. I would kind of put my hand up and get more involved, and that was at the chapter level.
And what about for NIGP? Because you have a fairly significant position that you're filling now as a volunteer with NIGP.
Yeah, so with the NIGP, it was interesting enough. I got to go to my first forum, is kind of where it all started, and it was in Orlando. And I was there, and there was a lot of colleagues from Ontario there, and we were all kind of just hanging out, and I met a few people. And I mean, one of the members of I think he was in the board at the time, Mike Beavis. I'll shout out to Mike Beavis. And Mike came up to me and said, you know what, you'd be good, a good volunteer. And really that's where it started. He approached me and really kind of encouraged me to get involved, and I'm glad he did, because it's been great. When that started, it was more of I was checking the website just to see what was going on, and this new change with the governance board came up, and part of it was the chapter ambassadors. And I actually applied for it back then, and those days it was the pilot year, and we had to do like an interview, such as like kind of like this, speaking on video and introducing yourself and kind of how you would be good for that role. And interestingly enough, I got it, and actually 6 years later, still an ambassador. My term finishes today, so this is the last day of my term. That I'm pretty sure it finishes July 1st. But it's been really rewarding. Probably one of the most exciting positions I've had, because I was able to visit many of the chapters in the Area 3 that I was involved with, and meet tons of members and make many friends, colleagues, networks, connections when I want to give somebody a call for a particular bid, or say hi or whatever. It helps me personally, professionally. It's interesting, like I get an RFP, and the RFP would say, someone one of these states that I visit, they have a client there, and surely enough, if I knew them, I could just really pick up the phone and connect. It's that simple. And my agency often goes, how do you know these people, right? And I say, well, it's because of the network that I've developed through the NIGP, which is powerful, extremely powerful, and it's really hard to put into words how powerful that is when you tell people, the network that you have with all the membership and everybody you meet from an opportunity such as being an ambassador alone, right? So that was the first one, and then that kind of morphed into more. Now being chair of the certification commission for the NIGP CPP, being able to build a certification and for our profession is extremely rewarding. Taking our profession to the next level. It's very rewarding to me, because I constantly want to increase that bar for us in the profession, so others recognize us and realizing how important we are in this industry. And I mean, more and more so now, Linda, we kind of had a little bit of a talk earlier. Supply chain has become the buzz, right? Across everything that's been going on in the world lately and in the past few years. And really, when we talk about public purchasing and procurement, supply chain and everything encompasses that. So I think that more and more so now, people are really realizing the value that we have. Volunteering morphed even further from the certification commission. Once I was a chair, it gave me a seat on the governing board, which at the strategic level then allows me to kind of build and decide on policy with other great leaders on the governing board. So that's been very rewarding, and kind of seeing how the pieces get put together at the organization, and for all the members that we serve, trying to make their days go better with all the offerings that we have, and allowing them to look up certain things in the library, or looking at the strategic value of a certain white paper that's being done, or just advancing the profession into areas where what's coming next in 2023 and 2024, just rewarding, because you see it grow, and you see you have the ability to make a change in something that we all are very near and dear to.
So, Cara, you mentioned the impact that your networking has had with your internal colleagues, and the breadth of the networking that you have. Can you just give us a little bit of an idea of how much value that network has brought back to your organization, and maybe also to your staff? You mentioned the recognition of, wow, this network you've got, but are there tangible benefits that people could potentially expect from having that breadth in their network?
Yeah, it's a good question, and absolutely. I mean, part of the part of our day-to-day, right, is challenges that we sometimes haven't faced before. And or seen in our, in our environment, where, probably 98% or higher, somebody else has done it, right? And that network offers you the ability to tap into and say, hey, by the way, have you done this? And I mean, I've yet to have someone say, no, we've never seen that or done that before. That's a new one. And that network is so powerful that you have those individuals that you can call to, or, pick up the phone, email, whatever. That's really a huge benefit. And a lot of them made at Forum, Forum or on Insight. You build these kind of relationships when you ask certain questions, and then it kind of goes offline into maybe sharing some more information into a discussion. And then, hey, you end up meeting somewhere at an event or at Forum, and then you thank them, and then you maybe have a lunch together or something, just to build more rapport. But as it translates back to the office, it's like, people, when they say to you, hey, we have this new RFP that we're doing, and one of the comments I remember getting is, don't worry, Carl will handle it, he knows a lot of people. Like, he'll find somebody. If you don't know how to do it, he'll find somebody that does. And I mean, it's so true, because being involved allows that for you to be strategic and encompass your strategy with others from other areas and other agencies, right? So it's nothing but powerful to have that connection with everybody.
Oh, great. And with the supply chain issues that everybody is struggling with these days, any time that can be saved in that development can be very critical, right?
Absolutely. I mean, just the other day there was a good session, I believe, on the NIGP, which is about cost increases and how we're handling it, and whether you use indices and what kind of clauses are people using. And the conversation was great. Like, some are using indices, some used escalation, de-escalation clauses. How we handling, the price of fuel and, materials and construction, just gathering that information from other colleagues. Where else are you going to be able to do that? You can't just do that on your own, really, like, and try to get a bunch of people together, because you have to have a central forum for that to be provided, and the NIGP provides that, which then like translates to me to going back to rethinking how we have things in our documents, and how others are doing with great ideas, and looking at other indices and areas where we can improve and hone in on those costs. I mean, it's a challenge in itself to fight these escalations coming from vendors or other challenges that that others are having. It's not great to have these challenges, but it makes you feel a little bit better when you hear others are having the same challenges too, right? That you're not the only one in that fight, right? For finding vehicles or those not wanting to bid on fixed price contracts and those types of things. So you can go back and say, hey, by the way, like I often say, by the way, this is not just a Canadian problem, it's North America. I mean, my American colleagues are having the same issues that we're having, and that speaks volume when you say it in a meeting.
And there's a little bit of a comfort level there, right? That we're all in that same leaky boat.
Absolutely, right? You feel kind of good about it, but
now you mentioned that you had a mentor when you started out with OPBA, and having known you from when you first started with the public sector, Carl, because we met early on in your public sector career. I'm suspecting that you also are a mentor to your own staff and are getting them involved, as well as being a mentor to OPBA members and anyone else that you've met in your travels as a chapter ambassador. Would I be correct in making that assumption?
Yeah, absolutely, Linda. You know me quite well, right? So I mentor, well, obviously my staff, mentor them through hopefully getting them to get certified, and part of their plans and our goals this year is to get them certified with the NIGP CPP. And mentoring, I mentor numerous colleagues across the province, a lot that enter the profession. A lot of them have my number. A lot of them I gave my number, a lot of them I didn't give my number to. But I mean, I get calls all the time about, certain challenges, and I'm okay with that, because I was in that role too at one point. So I know what it feels like. Like I said to you, when I started 14 years ago, I had that great mentor that mentored me, which is recently retired. And, but I got to give back, because I wouldn't have been able to learn and bounce something off somebody if I didn't have that. it's very powerful and very useful. Although I was already in procurement for years, I was in the private sector, in which there's a big difference and a lot of changes and stuff that you need to kind of grasp and learn. So yeah, I enjoy giving back, and I mean, as when I can, definitely. But yeah, I definitely get calls from all across the province quite frequently.
Well, good. So, moving forward, you've talked about your volunteering with NIGP and your staff volunteering with NIGP and being mentored yourself and being a mentor to your staff. I'm also expecting, knowing you, that you are also mentoring your internal customer base in leading them through the idiosyncrasies and difficulties in supply chain issues, particularly now that we're in this COVID situation and the way supply chain has pretty much collapsed to a great extent. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, internally it becomes challenging because procurement we have a lot of legislation to follow, a lot of rules to abide by, and a lot of changes coming down the path, right? So I think the biggest thing is giving some sort of a training program when you can to those internal customers, allowing them to understand the process that we have to deal with and the challenges that we have, and for us to be able to manage them within the knowledge of procurement is also powerful, right? So these ever-changing times with new challenges that come up is really important that we stay on top of them and understand them and have strategies to mitigate them, right? And that's all through, like I said before, the network that we have at the NIGP helps with that, because there's sessions that may come up, or if there isn't a session come up, why don't you make one? Why don't you ask for one to come up, and you could get a bunch of colleagues and professionals together to talk about what's going on. And like I said, so that simple example of the de-escalation that we talked about it here in the office shortly after, and to strategize about it going forward, and the things that we're looking at for the future. How are we going to plan for 2023 inventory? And some of the discussions that came out of that in the last few months were buying vehicles early, looking at construction costs for the next year, where the indices, all of those things that we can bring value to from a procurement professional at the C-suite level, right? The procurement has the ability to sit at the C-suite level and provide such great recommendations and knowledge, because this is the stuff that we've been living for years, right? Before supply chain was a buzz, it's our day-to-day. So when someone asks a certain question about shipping and transportation, we're ready. We've been living that, so it's powerful. So when the colleagues internally look to you, they look to someone that's knowledgeable, and that you've been able to relay some of that message to them, through the times of that are very tough, such as now.
That's great, Carl. I'd like to thank you very much for being with us today and sharing your experience with volunteering. And hopefully that will encourage others to volunteer in their local chapter with NIGP or wherever else there's a need that they can fulfill. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Thanks, Linda. Take care.
Thank you.
Okay, so this month we're talking about the relationships that we build with our suppliers. And so I thought this story would be perfect. This month's segment is brought to you by Kevin Marsh, former CEO of SCANA. SCANA is who we in the Midlands of South Carolina used to use for electricity. And they were a quasi-state agency at the time, which meant that they had oversight by the legislature, but they didn't necessarily, or they weren't necessarily governed by the procurement code, with the exception of if the legislature said they had to be governed by the procurement code. They usually pretty much followed our practices and our laws in how they handled business. But in any case, What happened in this instance was that the CEO, Kevin Marsh, was basically, well, he was where the buck stopped, where with the company, they hired contractors to build two nuclear reactors in South Carolina. The project ended up failing. But in between that time, beginning in 2013, maybe till up and about 3 or 4 years ago, they would come to the legislature and say, look, you know, the reactor is going well, but we need a rate hike. And the rate hike would be because they needed more money in order to finish the site. I have to read this to you because I couldn't adequately say this in a conversation. So according to the newspaper article, it said evidence presented by federal prosecutors showed that Marsh intentionally defrauded taxpayers so SCANA could obtain and retain rate increases imposed on customers and qualify for up to $2.2 billion in tax credits. All right, let's talk about that from the perspective of somebody who was paying bills to SCANA. Maybe we shouldn't, because I already told y'all I can be petty. In any case, due to this fraud, said acting U.S. Attorney DeHart, an $11 billion nuclear ghost town paid for by SCANA investors and customers now sits vacant in Jenkinsville, South Carolina. That's right. They kept going to the legislature and reporting that the project was going well. And they would also go to the legislature and ask for more money to keep the project going. But ultimately, the project failed. And so what U.S. Attorney DeHart said was, hopefully this prosecution will deter other corporate fraud in the future. Now, Marsh was 66 years old. He ended up basically getting a sentence of 3 years and 2 additional years. No. The sentence was for 2 years in prison, 3 additional years that he would have to give. Like they didn't really call it probation, but it was like oversight. And then he had to figure out a way to pay a lot of this money back to the citizens of South Carolina. Why am I bringing this out to you? Because basically, this was a matter of contract administration. And the feds felt like you knew that, or he knew that project was not going right, and he reported differently. Take a good look at your contracts, because that's the moral of the story. If they're not going right, then don't report it as such. Do something about it. And that's what the Fed said, that he had a responsibility to do something about this failed project before the state of South Carolina, its citizens and its taxpayers lost all of that money. Now, I do have a copy of this article in my arsenal that I saved, or you can find it. Again, I'm always searching for these things because I might look good in black, but it will not be a day when I look good in orange. Thank you all for joining me.
Hello, friends. We hope you have enjoyed the conversations about supplier relationships in today's broadcast. When having this conversation, it almost feels like we tend to land from one extreme to the other. We have those that are concerned about even having the slightest conversation with a supplier because they don't want to be accused of showing favoritism. Meanwhile, others don't see any issue at all with cultivating supplier relationships with not enough regard for boundaries to maintain that procurement integrity that's critical in everything that we do. It's easy for us as procurement professionals to focus on our struggles. How are we supposed to maintain our budgets and projects with inflation and force majeure enactments and price adjustments and supply chain shortages everywhere we turn? It can be overwhelming and frustrating when the majority of our emails are another issue or a struggle we have to fix. Bless our hearts, it can be tough to be a procurement professional in today's climate. But have you ever stopped to think for a moment what it feels like to be the one sending those requests? Our suppliers are doing everything they can to maintain their own budgets and their own profit levels to ensure that they can remain in business to do what we ask them to do. Inflation, supply chain shortages, price increases are hitting them too. They want and need to maintain their contracts with us. But how much can they absorb before they have to make that ask? What do they do if the contract will not allow for any flexibility and they're faced with the decision of having to break the contract, which can have long-term effects, or taking a monetary hit that can also have lasting effects or even put them out of business in some cases? At times, it can feel like a battle of tug of war with each side pulling the other, trying to get them onto their side. But take a moment and remember we're all in the same boat. Do what you can to partner and lock arms and carry those burdens together as best we can. Maybe there's a creative solution that neither side has thought of on their own, that if we just talk through it, we can find a way through to get to the end result we're both looking for, which is project success at the end of the day. Communication and collaboration will get us through this season better than anything else. So until next time, friends, stay positive, stay objective, and stay connected.